I'm David McClinton. I'm an artist and designer living and working in Austin, Texas. And these are 10 things I can't live without. After 25 years of being a graphic designer, figuring out a way to make art just for me, just for a good reason, a good cause, so to speak, started honestly with Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, that sort of stuff. I just thought, I can't keep creating things for other people. I have to create some things that tell a story, not just to sell something. These are 10 things I can't live without. Let's start with music. I'm just gonna rattle off some names. I could get 10 just from that. James Brown, Marvin Gaye, Miles Davis. I was sort of introduced to that stuff from my dad. He had an old reel-to-reel recorder, and I never knew my dad was cool until I started going through his record collection. Prince, Michael Jackson, it just goes on and on. But really, honestly, Marvin Gaye would be the central focus there, because he started making this beautiful pop music that had a message. And I remember the song Ecology, the song What's Going On, the song Make Me Wanna Holla. I love that stuff. It's so relevant, still relevant. He could write that song today and it would be perfect timing. Something that seeps into my work is pop culture. I was an only child, so, you know, my dad was in the Air Force, my mom worked, so a lot of times I was by myself looking at a TV. So, you know, Gilligan, Happy Days, Good Times, the Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, those were some of my friends. Those were some of the companions I had. So some of those jokes and some of those one-liners are still in my head. I could rattle off so many Sanford and Son jokes, so many Fred Sanford jokes. So in a lot of ways, revisiting that, thinking back of, you know, when you look at some history and you realize Malcolm X used to be friends with Red Fox. Can you imagine that? So those little historical moments, those little historical tidbits have always been in my brain. So I would say one of the things I can't live without is my memory of pop culture. Another thing I couldn't live without is the previous generation. We never really learned about Black history in school. You know, you might learn about the Dred Scott ruling, you might learn about Plessy versus Ferguson, you might learn those little tidbits, but not anything substantial beyond that. The church was good because we had to do book reports and little mini biographies on, you know, Marcus Garvey, on, you know, Sojourner Truth. Like, there's so many things that I wouldn't know if it weren't for the previous generation, so I'll say that. Another thing I can't live without is a sense of injustice, I guess. That's the thing that drives me in a lot of ways. It's something that I bring up, I talk about it almost every day. I remember, you know, there are all these names in our heads, right? We think about Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, the names I've brought up, Sandra Bland, all these names. But I remember the first name I ever heard that was associated with that was Emmett Till. And there was a story about Emmett Till in Jet magazine with the photo that we've all seen. And I was probably 10 years old reading it. So that sense of I'm an other, and maybe me being an other could be dangerous, could get me in trouble just for being me, that's been in my head for a very, very long time. And the town I grew up in, at the time, like I said earlier, was predominantly white and Latino. So my elementary school, Lone Star Elementary, there were only like 3 Black kids there. So I was in a fight almost every week. And then you have that playing in your head, these images of seemingly the world not really caring about young Black men. And now I'm fighting every day too, and I'm 8, 9, 10, trying to navigate that in my head. So one of the things I can't live without is my father's pride in me. He's proud of me despite the fact that I didn't go down certain stereotypical routes that he may have wanted. He may have wanted a linebacker as a son, instead he got an artist. So that, the idea that my folks didn't care and just let me be me, I can't live without that. That's one thing that I'll never forget. The feeling of being loved and someone having pride in you. That's a great feeling. All right, another thing I can't live without is the phone, the camera on the phone, more importantly. Part of my art involves taking photos of textures, and I do it all the time. I'll probably do it before I leave here. I'll take photos of the bricks. And it's not that it's a specific thing. I just like having a repository of images that I can use later. So to have this thing in my pocket that allows me to capture an image everywhere I go is another thing I can't live without. All right, another thing I can't live without is my own personal history. My mother's done a really good job of digging up old photos and old newspaper clippings and birth announcements and birth certificates to try to trace our family. And I was partly raised by that woman right there, born in 1900, Mary Johnson. She was a huge part of my upbringing because not only did she tell me these great stories, but I knew that she had struggled in her life, and I knew that she had worked some menial jobs. But she still had this sense of pride despite all that. She still had this sense of place, and she knew what I was going to go through when I grew up. And she was able to instill a sense of pride, a sense of fun, a sense of believing in myself. You know, the whole you can do anything you want, and then you get out in the world and you realize maybe you can't. She never really let that seep in. She was always so encouraging. Lived to be 95. And yeah, I can't live without her advice. I can't live without her memory. Another thing I can't live without is this tool, this laptop. My work is digital collage. I take photos, family photos, found imagery, the texture photos I talked about, and even my own face, if I need an eye in a certain angle or a nose or a mouth at a certain angle. And I composite it all on this machine and print it out to paper, sometimes metal. And so yeah, I would be making art in a different way if it weren't for this. So this is certainly one thing I can't live without. And as a graphic designer, it pays the bills as well. I'll say another thing I can't live without is Adobe Photoshop. That's what I build my work in. Started using Photoshop as part of my job as a designer. I needed to use it. And when I circled back to start making art, I didn't have a studio space. I didn't have painting or sculpting, which I honestly used to do when I was in school. I just didn't have the room to do it. So the practicality of using a computer and Photoshop just made sense. So that's another thing I can't live without, just by happenstance in my certain situation. The 10th thing that I can't live without is friends and family who've inspired me and encouraged me. You know, when I first showed art a few years back, I didn't know what to expect. And the support that I've gotten from the community and some of my friends has been absolutely incredible. From not only buying work, but showing up at the shows and patting me on the back and giving me an encouragement, that sort of thing, is something that I don't think anyone can live without.